Hi there, this is Jen Price. I'm a drone pilot and LTAN trainee with the Forest Service, and I'm going to be talking about our use of nighttime aerial ignitions to protect a key watershed, as well as some geospatial and fire modeling tools that I used to support situational awareness and tactical decision-making day one in the field on the Forsyth Fire. Little background on the Forsyth Fire. It was started by lightning and discovered June 19th, 2025 in southwest Utah, burning in the headwaters of the Santa Clara River. And this is an important water source for the growing city of St. George, as well as a number of agricultural communities along its banks. And the Pine Valley Mountains are the source of the Santa Clara River. They're super prominent down here in the I-15 corridor by Hurricane. The elevation is just over 3,000 feet, and you've got the northern fringes of the Mojave Desert plant community. And then you have this dramatic rise up this eastern escarpment up to a maximum of 10,300 feet along the ridge line at Signal Peak. And this high country is a mix of mixed conifer, bristlecone pine. And this is the most botanically diverse mountain range in Utah. Coming around to the west side, we have the community of Pine Valley, and this surrounding ring of high mountains is important to the community of Pine Valley as a recreational venue, as the headwaters of the Santa Clara. And because this is a sky island, it catches a lot of strong winds, interesting weather, and there's a history of wildfires starting up high from lightning or other sources up in the timber and being blown down into surrounding communities. So we can see the orange outline from NIROPS of the Forsyth Fire on the 20th of June. And that's just what this fire did from a mid-slope lightning ignition point. It caught a southwest wind, strong wind event, and was blown down into the community across the valley and up the slope on the northern side, and unfortunately burned 17 structures in the process. There was a fuels and fire behavior advisory in place at the time. The main highlights here are critically dry 1,000-hour fuels, drought-stressed brush and trees, and persistent red flag conditions. And local fuel moisture levels were nearing or exceeding historic lows. St. George and the Pine Valley Mountains were in a D2 severe drought at the time. This is an image of the slope north of the valley after the fire went through. And you see there's a lot of white ash. It burned really hot. It almost looks like it snowed. And in the background here, the fire is progressing up into the upper reaches of the watershed. So this is the picture that we had when we arrived with the drone module. And wildfires are complex events that really impact the landscape in two phases. There's the short-term direct impact from the fire to communities and forests, and then there's the longer-term effects, such as soil sterility from extremely hot burns, loss of seed sources, potential for mass soil wasting, and flooding and debris flows. So looking at this landscape with a community and the steep slopes around it and the watershed, we're really considering both short-term and long-term impacts and how those could be mitigated. So we got in place for some IR flights along the fire's edge that first night. You can see our module members here. On the left is Kelly Cornwall. He's a fuels FMO and Type 1 burn boss off of the Fish Lake. Kelly has probably done more stand replacement, prescribed burning, and mixed conifer than anyone else in the country. And on the right side is Sandra Miller, who's a sharp new pilot out of Salt Lake doing a lot of natural resources work, and she's also a GIS specialist. And then we had myself, a FEMO FOBS LTAN trainee and drone pilot. So good complement of varied skill sets in our group. And you can see we're launching out of this nice Ponderosa grove. For those who aren't familiar with Ponderosa pine, it's one of our fire resilient fuel types in the West. It's got thick bark and this nice open crown structure that makes it difficult for fire to travel up into the canopy. And it also spreads out the needle cast, so you don't wind up with as thick a layer of needle cast underneath the trees Ponderosa is really adapted to a high frequency, low severity fire cycle. So about every 5 to 20 years, these groves like to see fire come through and clean up the surface fuels and raise the canopy base height. So a ponderosa stand that's seeing a healthy fire return interval will have this nice open park-like look. Another key species in the Pine Valley Mountains is aspen. These are fire resilient in a totally different way. Aspen groves are very diverse. They host a whole lot of different grasses and forbs and shrubs, as well as this understory of shade-tolerant conifers. Aspens themselves are pretty thin-barked. They're susceptible to damage and disease, and these stands are really adapted to have a fully stand-replacing fire at longer intervals. And so this is a typical appearance of a Pine Valley aspen stand with lots of conifer underneath. This is really ready to burn. And the great thing about these aspen stands, when they do burn, they have this very durable clonal root structure. And within a few years after the fire, you'll see lots and lots of sprouting aspen, lots of browse and cover for wildlife. So we had kind of a slow shift that first night, and we naturally got to wondering what kind of fuels is the fire burning in, where is it potentially going to move to, and what tools do we have to minimize negative impacts. And we couldn't really see into those upper slopes, especially after nightfall, but we do have land fire vegetation layers. So here we're looking at ponderosa as these light green areas around the confluence of the three branches of the Santa Clara, as well as in some of the already burned areas and a lot up along these high ridges. Here we're looking at aspen. It's the lighter green, so a lot of it where the fire's hung up on the southwest corner, as well as up in these high valleys and in this burn scar over here. And we can put on the full vegetation layer. There's a lot of colors going on here, but your brain kind of gets used to looking at it. So these earth tones, yellows, oranges, browns, are desert grass and shrubs. This dark gray is pinyon juniper, PJ. And then all of these shades of green are our timber components, mixed conifer, aspen, ponderosa, going all the way up to the ridge line. We can take a spin around to the edge of the world, this eastern escarpment here, and we see a lot of light gray, non-burnable. This is cliffs and scree. The timber's drooping over the edge a little bit in places. The lighter blues are mountain mahogany. This red is a recent burn scar around a campground, which was the one piece of infrastructure over here. That was a nice barrier. We've got some more oranges, sage, desert shrubs, and these light minty greens are oak brush, maple brush along the drainages, and then plenty of PJ down lower. Let's take a look at this southwest corner. This area is important because if the fire continued to flank out to the west, it would set itself up for another one of those prevailing southwest wind events to push it back into occupied areas. So really important to stop this piece of the fire. And we can see that there's a lot of recent red burn scar that it's hung up on. Remember, we also had that aspen up above it. And looking at the overhead imagery, you can see how sparse that burn scar is. It burned pretty severely in there, a little foreshadowing of what the Forsyth Fire could potentially do to the watershed, and a really nice barrier feature. We can highlight these scars in blue, so they're important features. While we're on this southwest corner, let's take a look at Fire Guard. This is courtesy of the DoD. They've got some groups of soldiers that sit in bunkers in Colorado and California, and they use the military satellite network and other sources to look for incoming Russian missiles. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of those, so they also look at wildfires. And you can see they draw out these polygons often every 10 to 15 minutes. This is as close as we get to real-time imaging of the fire perimeter. And you can see these, they were there drawing out these elongated wind-driven growth polygons as the fire moved downhill into town. And they specifically say not to use fire guard for tactical decision making. Like you wouldn't want to turn your back on the fire and use fire guard to let you know when you should go to your safety zone. I find it to be pretty darn useful. And the fire guard's got a story map. If you Google it, you can actually fill out a form to request that they pay extra attention to your incident if you're having a lot of rapid growth, and that improves accuracy. Another pretty quick tool that I like is the fire modeling available in IFTDIS. And this is just auto-generated modeling. It doesn't approach the level of detailed understanding that you'd get from spending a couple weeks boots on the ground in a division or having a fire model that's carefully dialed in by an LTAN or an FBAN. So this is based on auto 97th percentile weather conditions from the nearest RAWs. And IFTDIS basically just does a behave run in every individual pixel of this map. And this one is pretty apocalyptic looking. It's not really representative of reality, fortunately. We've got a really good local fire professor in LTAN, Brad Washaw, that likes to say that all models lie, but some are useful. And that's absolutely the case here. This one is quite a bit more useful, actually. This is the rate of spread auto 97th run from IFTDIS. And here you can see these slower rates of spread in the burn scars. Those were very representative of what happened. And then you see this pocket of higher spread rates in these steep drainages of the middle, the right hand, and the left hand fork of the Santa Clara. The fire is just set up to make some pretty rapid, pretty high severity movement through. So nothing's as good as your own observations, but this is a great aid to the imagination if you can't see everywhere that you want to due to topography or distance or smoke and darkness. And with pretty minimal effort over a couple days of observing and talking to local folks who've been watching fire behavior, I was able to dial this in just a little bit to be more representative of what we were seeing for flame lengths during the daytime versus nighttime. So we can see what we have here is an area that the fire is pretty inevitably going to move into in the near term in the Santa Clara River drainage. And even if we had unlimited resources, and in reality we were pretty scant on resources, we probably wouldn't be able to stop it from moving through there. However, by firing it at night, we could control how it moved through there. So let's go back to the night of the 24th and watch our fire, the aerial ignitions at night between sunset and midnight in the middle fork versus the natural fire growth in the right fork and the left fork. In these other forks, the fire growth is occurring mostly during peak burning periods, and it's taking big chunks. So here's the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th. So in contrast to this nice, gentle, intentional mosaic of nighttime fire in the middle fork, in the right and left forks, we've got these daytime pulses of fire getting up into the crowns and throwing out spots. Here's a flight over the burn area the next morning with our smaller Anafi drone. And on the right side, you can see the 2016 saddle fire scar. It really moved through the crowns, took out a lot of that conifer, but now there's a whole bunch of aspen and conifer regen underneath there. And you can contrast that with our nighttime aerial ignitions on the left side. Very intentional, low-key burn that stayed on the ground and left a lot of trees to protect the watershed. We're looking out over the Saddle Fire scar, just above the morning inversion clouds. And we'll take one more pass over our burnout. And soil burn severity is really important for the future well-being of the community. We talked about soil sterilization and loss of seed sources. Flooding is another big concern. One of the Bear Team products was this peak flow map. So this is showing increases in stream flows over the next couple of years due to water running off rather than sinking into the soil and not being slowed down by vegetation because it's been lost to fire. So some of these drainages are going to see 55-40% increase in flow. Looks like 66% overall through the Santa Clara drainages. And in these areas of lots of moderate or severe burn, this can be a really extreme increase, like we have 235% over here. Let's look at fire growth, NIROPS perimeters, overlaying on soil burn severity and the three forks of the Santa Clara. So here we're looking up the right fork, looking towards the south, and we can see the fire took out most of that eastern aspect of the drainage in one big growth day on the 24th, and then continued in daytime pulses up the opposite side, 28th, 29th, and 30th. And the result was a lot of moderate severity, especially on that eastern aspect, a little bit of high and a mix of lower and very low. And similar story of natural daytime fire growth in the left fork of the Santa Clara. Here we've got the fire perimeter on the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th. There's a whole lot of yellows and reds in that drainage. And finally, the middle fork drainage, where we prevented those daytime spurts of fire growth. Here's the perimeter on June 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th. Having UAS and nighttime aerial ignitions capability on this fire really gave us a wonderful opportunity to moderate the outcome in this middle fork compared to what happened in the right and the left fork. And we can go back to our fire modeling. We were anticipating just as much severe burn in that middle fork as the other two drainages, but by burning it at night, we changed the outcome. And I'll leave you with this really beautiful flight through the Pine Valley Wilderness and the upper Santa Clara watershed.